Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something really foundational for Indian governance, the whole idea of state autonomy.
Absolutely. It's key to understanding the structure.
And, especially important if you're preparing for exams like the UPSC, this is kind of the blueprint stuff.
Definitely. And it's not just history, it's happening now. The Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, M.K. Stalin, he's just set up a new high-level committee.
Oh, really? What's the focus?
Well, it's specifically to look again at center-state relations and explore how to maybe bolster the state's constitutional rights.
That sounds familiar. Didn't something similar happen, like, way back?
It really does echo the past. Almost 50 years ago, C.N. Annadurai, who was chief minister then, set up the Rajamannar Committee. 1969, that was.
Okay, so there's a clear historical thread here. So I guess our mission for this deep dive is to unpack those historical concerns, the ones the Rajamannar Committee raised, and see why they still matter so much today.
Exactly. We'll trace that line from then to now. And for our analysis, we're drawing on reports and articles from sources like The Hindu and the Indian Express.
Great. Okay, let's get into the background a bit more.
Well, the first thing is this new committee, Stalin's committee, it didn't just appear out of the blue. It connects directly back to that earlier effort by Annadurai, the Rajamannar Committee. Its report was actually submitted later, under M. Karunanidhi, to PM Indira Gandhi.
So these questions about the center-state balance, they've been around for a long, long time.
Decades. And a core finding from the Rajamannar Committee really set the stage. They noticed this growing dominance by the center.
Dominance how? Like interfering in state matters.
Yeah, basically. More central control over things that were traditionally state responsibilities. And one reason they pointed to was often you had the same political party ruling at both levels, center and state.
Ah, okay. That makes sense politically.
And they took it further. The Rajamannar Committee argued that even though the Constitution looks federal, how it was being applied in practice led to what they called de facto centralization.
De facto centralization, meaning, in reality, the center was calling the shots more and more.
That was their concern, that states were becoming more like administrative arms of the center rather than autonomous units. And, this doesn't just weaken autonomy. It can make governance less responsive locally, maybe even hinder development on the ground.
So how did they see this happening? What tools, constitutionally speaking, did they think the center was using?
They flagged a few specific articles, Articles 246 and 257, for example. These give the union government the power to issue directions to states.
Directions. And make sure they're followed.
Exactly. And ensure compliance. That gives the center quite a bit of clout constitutionally.
Right. That power to compel is significant. What about Article 356, President's Rule? That always comes up.
Oh, definitely. They were very critical of Article 356. They called it a drastic and unprecedented constitutional weapon.
Strong words. What was the specific worry there? Misuse.
Precisely. The fear was it could be used not just for genuine constitutional breakdowns, but, politically, to undermine state governments and autonomy.
Okay, so they identified these articles as potential problems. What did they suggest doing about it? What were their big recommendations for boosting state autonomy?
They had some pretty clear ideas. First off, they said get rid of Article 356 altogether. Just repeal it.
Wow, completely. To prevent that perceived misuse.
Yeah, to safeguard elected state governments. And second, they pushed hard for setting up a really robust interstate council under Article 263.
A stronger interstate council. What was wrong with the existing one? Or the idea of one?
Well, the criticism often is that the existing council hasn't met regularly or been very effective. The Rajamannar Committee wanted something more permanent, more empowered, a real place for negotiation and sorting out differences.
Right, a council with actual teeth. Now, they didn't just look at the Constitution itself, did they? They also talked about other bodies.
That's a really important point. They were quite critical of what they called extra-constitutional bodies. The Planning Commission was the big example they used.
Extra-constitutional meaning? Not set up by the Constitution directly.
Exactly. Created by the executive, by government order. The worry was these bodies, like the Planning Commission back then, could end up having a huge amount of influence over states.
Bypassing the constitutional structures.
Potentially, yes. Wielding power without the same checks and balances.
And was this linked to money? Finance often seems to be at the heart of center-state issues.
Absolutely. They really honed in on discretionary grants from the center.
Discretionary meaning? The center decides who gets what and how much.
Pretty much. And the committee argued this gave the center a massive whip in its hands. It created financial dependency.
Making states reliant on the center's goodwill for funds.
That was the charge, and they felt it weakened the role of the Finance Commission, which is the constitutional body meant to handle resource distribution.
So it sidelined the constitutional process.
In their view, yes. They use this really stark phrase describing states as being reduced to suppliants for aid.
Suppliants for aid. That paints a pretty bleak picture of the relationship they saw.
It really does. It highlights that feeling of imbalance.
So if you put it all together, they saw multiple things threatening the federal balance.
They did. They warned about this triple threat, as they termed it.
Triple threat. What were the three parts?
1, centralized planning, like through the Planning Commission. 2, those big discretionary grants creating financial dependence. And 3, the influence of party politics, especially when the same party ruled everywhere.
Okay. Planning, grants, and politics.
Yeah, they argued these three things together were steadily eroding the federal structure. Plus, they noted the center seemed to be getting involved in state subjects quite often, creating this feeling of anxiety to exercise overall supervision.
But isn't the counter-argument usually that you need a strong center for a strong India? For unity, security, that kind of thing?
That's the common argument, yes. But the Rajamannar Committee flipped it.
How so?
They suggested that the center trying to do too much, taking on too many state-level responsibilities, could actually make it weaker.
Weaker. By being overstretched.
Sort of. Their point was about focus. True strength, they argued, comes from restraint. The center should focus on its core national duties and let the states handle theirs effectively. It's about a better division of labor, not weakening the nation.
And didn't they bring in C. and Annadurai's own words on this?
They did, expensively. They quoted a speech he gave in 1967.
What was his main point?
He stressed that, yes, the center needs strong powers for national sovereignty, for integrity, absolutely. But, he argued, it shouldn't be encroaching on subjects like, say, health or education, things that don't directly impact national security. Let the states manage those.
So, respecting that division of powers laid out or intended in the Constitution.
Precisely. Respecting the federal principle in practice.
But couldn't someone argue back that, well, for national unity, for making sure policies are implemented effectively across the country, maybe you do need a degree of centralization, even in areas like health or education sometimes?
That's a fair counterpoint, and it's part of the ongoing debate. But the Rajamannar Committee's view, their perspective, was that real unity and effective policy come more from cooperation, from a strong center and strong, empowered states working together.
Not from top-down control.
Right. They believed respecting state autonomy would actually lead to better governance closer to the people, which ultimately makes the whole nation stronger.
Okay, so let's jump forward. Almost 50 years later, we have the Stalin government in Tamil Nadu revisiting all this. What's driving it now? What are the current flashpoints?
Well, there's a whole list of contemporary issues feeding into it. You've got the ongoing arguments over NEET, the entrance exam for medicine.
Right, that's been a big one in Tamil Nadu.
Huge. Then there are issues around GST compensation states feeling they aren't getting their fair share or getting it on time. Concerns about delimitation, redrawing constituency boundaries.
Which could affect political representation.
Exactly, and various tussles over language policy. All these things are contributing to this feeling that center-state balance needs another look.
So the new committee, its job is basically to look at the current setup.
Yes, its mandate is to review the whole legal and constitutional framework as it stands today.
And then suggest ways to, what was the phrase? Restore the rights of states.
That's the idea, to come up with concrete suggestions for measures that could, in their view, restore the rightful autonomy and powers of the states within India's constitutional system.
But, and this seems like a big but, history isn't exactly encouraging here, is it? What happened to the Rajamannar report itself?
That's the cautionary tale. As our sources, the Hindu and the Indian Express, point out, the Rajamannar report, and reports from later commissions like Sarkaria and Punchy, which also looked into these issues, well, they were largely ignored.
Largely ignored by the central governments over the years.
Yeah. So whether this new committee's report will have a different fate, we just don't know. It remains to be seen.
Still, the effort itself says something.
It does. The spirit behind it, both back then and now, seems to echo what Annadurai was aiming for, trying to strengthen center-state relations through, goodwill, understanding, actual cooperation.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've really dug into the history here, looking at state autonomy concerns through the lens of the Rajamannar Committee.
Yeah, we looked at the constitutional bits, the other practices they flagged, their big ideas for change.
And, crucially, how those 50-year-old concerns are still incredibly relevant, still sparking debate and action today.
And for you listening, especially if you're aiming for the UPSC Civil Services exam, getting your head around this whole center-state power dynamic is absolutely vital.
Right. It touches everything in Indian polity and governance, super relevant for mains, and even prelims concepts.
Definitely. You need to understand this tug of war, this balance.
So maybe it's something for you to think about. Reflecting on all this, what aspects of the center-state relations, Church, the historical ones, the current ones, do you think are the most critical for India's future as a federal country?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. Please do like this, subscribe to the Deep Dive for more discussions like this one, and drop your questions or comments below. And just to remind you, our discussion today drew from reporting and analysis in the Hindu and the Indian Express.
And one final question to leave you chewing on. Considering the history, the present challenges, what does that ideal balance of power between the center and the states actually look like for a strong, unified, and well-run India in the 21st century?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. Complex, no easy answers, but so important for where the country goes next.